for coming. Dad didn't want a funeral or a big fuss make them. Sorry. But we decided we couldn't let him go without doing something. I'm Nick. For those of you who don't know me, used to be called Jason about 40 years ago. And first off, just want to do a little housekeeping. There are restrooms through the library there if anybody needs to use them. And we've got some wonderful food that has been prepared that we'll have after we're through with the talking part of things. I want to thank Howard Levine for suggesting the North Star House, which is a really special place for all of us. Peggy Levine's late life spent years helping restore this place, which is a historic home. I want to thank Janet Lowell and Terry Lowell and all the other little Lowells for helping so much with getting ready for this, because it's basically Charles and I just showed up here and put up a few chairs. Janet has done the lion's share of the preparation for this and made everything so much easier. So we're going to have a few of us are going to stand up and talk for a few minutes about Dad and hopefully get through it all right. And afterwards we're going to allow, if anybody wants to stand up and say a few words himself, just keep it brief. We would like to not stand here in the hot sun for too long, but if anybody has anything to say afterwards, I'll open up the floor, so to speak. And then afterwards we'll have a little bit of refreshments and just talk and hang out a little bit. Dad would have wanted to. We received so many messages, calls, and emails after Dad died, and the words that just kept coming up again and again were about his kindness, his fundamental good heart, and eagerness to help whenever asked. He was part of a vanishing breed, the humble but confident man. He never bragged, never boasted, but everyone who knew him knew that he could command attention when it was called for. He was a born leader who chose to be a helper rather than a commander. Dad had an extraordinary career with the Air Force that began long before my brother and I were even born. He signed up when he was only 17 years old. When I was 17, I could barely drive a car. He rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel in an almost 20-year career, and he probably could have risen even higher, but he said he never liked the playing politics that came with the highest ranks. Some of the things he did are still classified, and I might get arrested for talking about them. The stories he told us were pretty amazing. Up to 24-hour missions flying over the North Pole, over Soviet space, and over Cuba during the missile crisis. His 6-foot frame crammed into a tiny space about as big as this podium the whole time. He would fly with nuclear weapons on board at the height of the Cold War, ready for any sudden escalation. He worked with the B-58, the SR-71, the U-2, and many others during his career. It took me years to realize that when we were kids, we'd often watch James Bond movies on TV. And he wasn't just watching a fun adventure, he was critiquing it a little bit. And that's not quite how it was. And I always thought he looked just a little bit like Roger Moore as well. So that's why he's my favorite. We weren't even born when he did some of these things, but he carried that calm authority with him his whole life. How many fathers do you know who flew around with nuclear bombs? It's not for the nervous type. Mom and Dad always encouraged us to have adventures, to see the world and not be people who spend their lives in one small town. When I was nearly 8 years old, my brother a little younger, they packed up the house for a year and took us to Europe, traveling around in an increasingly rickety and mildewy and smelly tiny motorboat. It's fair to say that year changed our lives. When I moved to New Zealand with my family, nearly 20 years ago now, they could have objected. I mean, we're talking about taking their only grandson at the time to the other side of the world. But Dad, who spent a lifetime saying yes to people, never said a word against it. It was a great adventure, and he was all for it. My son Peter is 20 years old now, and in his 3rd year studying history and art history at university back in Auckland. He wouldn't be there without my father. When Peter was just 4 or 5 years old, Dad took him out to Beale Air Force Base to fly remote-controlled planes around. And that was it. Peter was all in on becoming a military history buff, a historian, and just a fanatic. To build dozens of intricate planes and military models themselves, and be constantly excited by the past. Dad's military career fascinated Peter, even though it was over 30, 40 years before he was born. The two of them had a great and wonderful bond. And I I'm really glad that in February, he and I came for one last visit while Dad was still able to get around. We went to the plane museum up in Sacramento and got a guided tour. And every plane we walked by, Granddad would say, flew on that, I worked on that, I flew on that. You can't get a tour like that. Every time we visited for years, from the time he was about 4 or 5 years old to the beginning of college, Peter and Dad would spend some time flying planes together. And Dad helped set the path for my son's future. In the last few years, despite the obstacles life threw at him, despite some of the suffering he had to endure, Dad somehow just kept becoming a better person all the time. It's as if in his final years he was distilled down to his purest essence, a kind and curious man whose first thoughts were often about others. In his heart, he wasn't judgmental, and I think he believed that our ultimate goal was just to be decent. There was a moment in February when we visited that I took a mental photograph of that I can't quite forget. And all it was a simple look Dad gave Mom. They were sitting on the couch together, and it was just a look filled with such pure love and admiration. A look that maybe you only get to see when you're married for more than 50 years. Through thick and thin, the good and the bad. We should all be so lucky to have somebody give us a look like that once in our lives. The very last lesson Dad had to show us was how to go. Not with anger and rage, with the unfairness of things, because it seems pretty unfair to all of us, but with gratitude. He said again and again these last months how glad he was for an extraordinary life, how lucky he was. The very last conversation I had with him was just a day or two before his final illness. And one of the last things he said was how incredibly proud he was of myself and my brother and our families and children. He fought hard, and for days after I think whatever made him kind of left, his body kept on, his mighty heart just pumping away. He would never boast, he would never swagger or joke, but he showed us how strong he really was until the very end. If things had gone differently, I'd like to think he could have made it to 100. He was like a redwood or a towering oak in the grand forest of our lives, steady, reliable, and protective of us all until his final days. Those who know Dad know he was a planner. Though it's probably no surprise that he left a very, very detailed to-do list after his passing to provide for Mom and to make things easier for Chaz and I. And it has. And he probably would have planned this event too. Hopefully it's all right. I am sad still deep down, and I'm probably going to be that way for a long time. And that's okay. Right now, right here, I just keep thinking of his smile, the smell of his aftershave, the scratchy stubble I felt in his cheek when he picked us up when we were little kids, the enormous Dirga dimple on his chin. It always fascinated me. Not bigger than mine. He always felt like the biggest man in the room to me, even when I grew up to be just a little taller. In a way, he always felt like he was lifting us up rather than pushing us down. I wouldn't have become a writer without him. Chaz would not have become a nurse. And I am grateful to have had him for as long as we did, even if it never would have felt like enough. How lucky we were. He loved flying in the wide open blue skies of California. In an email to a military historian several years back, he wrote that one benefit I found in flying aircraft was I always felt closer to God. I can't tell you how many times I felt like I was touching the face of God while flying missions over or around Vietnam, Korea, or Russia. He always liked this poem called High Flight by John Gillespie McGee Jr. And while Dad didn't want it for him, I know he wouldn't mind me reading it here today. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth, and danced the skies in laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I have climbed, and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds, and done 100 things you have not dreamed of, wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting wind along, and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up, up, the long, delirious burning blue. I've topped the windswept heights with easy grace, where never lark nor ever eagle flew. And while with silent lifting mind I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touch the face of God.
Thanks, Nick. My name is Janet Lowell, and I was incredibly honored to be asked to speak. I got it. Is there water in there? Thank you. You know, just a few days past, we celebrated Memorial Day. And while Dick did not give his life during military service, he decided that he was going to be a man of service for the rest of his life in the civilian world. And I've always been impressed and grateful for the way that he embraced life and the way that he gave himself to life. I've witnessed the continual but quiet way that Dick has served in so many ways, especially at Sierra Presbyterian Church. He served as an elder several times. And some of you remember the huge yard sales that we used to have on Labor Day weekend. It was not just a yard sale, it was a department store. People came to buy clothes, school clothes, jewelry, books, furniture, household items, even a boat or a car occasionally, antiques. And I'm looking at Lynn when I say antiques because she was in charge of antiques and jewelry. And household items. But one of the big attractions to the yard sale was always the tools and the yard equipment and outdoor stuff. And Dick was often in charge of that, and he enjoyed it immensely, even when it was hot. You know, we would be out there just perspiring, and Dick was smiling, greeting people, and just having a wonderful time. You know, that section of where the yard sale was on if you're facing the church or the business part of the church, it was on the left side, and it filled that whole part of the parking lot. It was a huge, huge job. Then the church obviously needed a new kitchen or a remodeled kitchen, and Dick, with Lynn's help, did all the remodeling on that, and Lynn did the design, and Dick suggested all the labor. Not that he did it all himself, but he did most of it. Another thing that I remember about his service at Sierra Pres is we used to have a lot of programs, outdoors, indoors, concerts, all kinds of things. Where's Pastor Bruce? Do you remember the concert of Blackwood Brothers?
Oh, yes.
That was our first major concert, and let's just say we'll leave it at that. But we had projects like that, and when we did, it took a lot of manpower. I mean, today took some effort to arrange this, but you can imagine when you're going to have 500, 600, 700, 800 people, that took a lot of manpower, which meant that we needed to use the inmates from the Nevada County Jail. And that was always Dick's responsibility to go get them, bring them back, supervise them, then provide them with dinner, and take them back. And he thoroughly enjoyed his time with them. One of the things I really remember most about Dick was that I had asked him if he would be on the advisory board for Link. And some of you from other congregations may know what Link is. It was a conglomerate of Nevada County churches that came together once a year in unison and did major projects throughout Nevada County of service. And Dick was often, he served on the board and did an amazing job. Plus, then he was in charge of helping with Care Crisis Nursery and what's the other? Women of Worth, yes, thank you. And to work for Women of Worth, you had to get security to go through. We always wondered if Dick would get security, but he did. And he made made sure that everybody else that worked there had, came through as well. You know, Dick, as Nick mentioned, always served in a quiet manner, smiled, encouraged others to be helpful with him. And speaking of smiles, Dick and Terry, my husband Terry, arranged to have 50 men dressed in black slacks, white shirts, black bow ties, and there were 50 of them that were the servers for the women's teas at Sierra Presbyterian Church. And we did that for, I think, how many years, Lynn? Yes, about 4. And you know what? Lynn was in charge of food, and everybody loved the food, but you know what the women loved the most? Those good-looking men that came marching through the door and served us with such proper. I think Terry had a mean streak in him because he made everybody serve. Did you serve from the right or serve from the left? But then there was at our church, we had small groups. And 30 plus years ago, a group of us, many of you are here today, got together as a small group Bible study. And it was the Beagleheimers, the Vanellis, the Dirgas, Judy Doyle, Linda Jones, the Lowells, the Champays, the Tyners, the Wilsons, and for a while, Ellen Gamelgard. And then Dick became the leader of this unruly group. But he did it with calm, and every time he led the Bible study, he did it with finesse and a lot of research. He must have done that in his life a lot. And so he led this Bible study group until the COVID monster took hold, and then we had to meet on Zoom, which we did meet every Wednesday on Zoom. And it's a good thing because 3 of our members moved away during that time, but we still got together every Wednesday night. Dick continued to be the leader, even when he started his chemo treatments. And sometimes, seeing him in between times, I knew that he did not feel well, that he never gave up being the leader. There were only a few times when he decided he couldn't do it that particular week, and so we canceled that meeting. But he led our small group until about 10 days prior to his death.
Wow.
And I knew something was wrong because on Tuesday he texted us, and in some unusual wording, he just said something about health and can't do. And then Chaz and Nick called me and gave me the news, and it was devastating, to say the least, to our group. You know, there's a scripture that I always think about, and I shared it with Dick in our small group, that to me personifies Dick, and it's Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you to be strong and courageous? Do not be afraid. Do not, I thought I knew this by heart. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And to me, that was Dick. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't discouraged. He just continued on. Because to him, his favorite verse was Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. And as Nick said, that was who his father was. He really was a still, quiet man. But those are all stories about church and service. Our family has known the Dirga family for over 40 years. We count it a blessing that we've had the privilege of sharing so much of life together. Of course, we had shared church life. Lynn and I served on the staff with Pastor Bruce. I believe least Lynn served until she moved back to Mississippi. And so we had that, but more importantly, we were sharing important things of life. Like the time that Nick needed a place to stay for a little while after he was out of school. And so Kristen, our daughter, opened her home to Nick, and he lived with Kristen. There was a lot of gossip about that, but I think it was good friends doing that. And then prior to that, all of a sudden, Kristen had been living in Italy, and she had just come home. Nick informed us that all of a sudden, suddenly, he was without a date for the senior ball. So Kristen, the older woman, stepped in and was Nick's date at the senior ball.
Changed my reputation forever.
And not for the better.
So, you can see that there's more to our family sharing than just what we did at church. The four of us, Dick and Lynn and Terry and I, shared an adventure in England of traveling together. And we saw many things, we had a wonderful time. And Dick had us on a full schedule. He did a lot of research, and we were going, and finally Lynn said, Dick, can we just have some downtime? He said, okay, whatever you want. We had an awful lot of laughter on that trip and had a wonderful time. And then there were all the Christmas Eve traditional dinners that we shared together, because the Dirgas were just part of our family. Chaz was there at least several times until you got involved with your wife. But we had a wonderful time together. Another really important part for me was that we got to share in each of our children's marriages. Todd and Kay, Kristen and Al, Nick and April, Chaz and Natasha, we got to be involved with all their wedding, each other. And in fact, at Nick and April's wedding, our granddaughters, Amelia and Madeline, were part of that wedding. They were little flower girls. Mm-hmm. So it only made sense that when Amelia grew up and got married, that Lynn and Dick traveled to Aptos to help put on an enormous, wonderful reception, and they were a big part of doing that for that wedding as well. You know, having friends, especially long-term friends, is one of God's greatest gifts. Terry and I are forever grateful that we've had that blessing and privilege of friendship with the Dirgas. We still have Lynn, and we miss Dick tremendously. But I want to leave you with this scripture out of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. May the Lord Jesus Christ himself and God our Father, who loved us and gave us eternal comfort and good hope through grace, comfort your hearts and establish them in every good work and in every good word. Amen.
Well done.
All right. I'm the second son. I'm Charles, or people know me as Chaz or Chas growing up. My speech will be kind of short and to the point, not the best speaker, so here we go. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today we gather to honor and remember Richard Dirga, who inspired my life, my family, and my friends in so many wonderful ways. Though words may fail to capture the depth of my feelings, I hope to share a glimpse of this incredible person he was and the legacy that he left behind. He was my father. He exceeded in everything to be the best parent, to us. His voice always had a gentle but firm ability to let me know he really cared. Any time of the day, I could call him, and he would just answer, ready to help, or just listen to me talk about my feelings on a particular topic. I remembered one day, after I had gone through basic training in the Army, Dad and I had a short conversation that was about why I joined the military. I told him that the recruiter made everything sound so wonderful. but later, I realized that this was really hard. And with that, he said, I was wondering, why did you join, decide not to go into the Air Force like I did? I said, I didn't know, but you probably would have been more happy, and you would have been able to do so many more things and fly around the world for free. I was like, well, I'm stuck being a mechanic in the military for the next 6 years. So that was a journey. He was right, because later it was Dad again who motivated me to do something that propelled me to become a nurse. I came back out after the military, not sure what I wanted to do, and kind of went to the junior college doing some prereqs and looked around, dabbled in things. And for me, it was like, well, what should I do? This is like a total 180 from coming out of the military. And here I was coming back as a mechanic, and then I stumbled into an anatomy and physiology class. And there I was fascinated just with the human body and how things work. And there was a veterinarian that taught the class, and I was like, well, that sounds interesting. So I went that way, and I went to his clinic and saw what he did and everything, and I was like, this is fascinating, I could do this. And he's like, well, how about another 18 years of school on top of what you have? And I was like, well, that's a lot of schooling to go back, and I don't think I would make it through everything. And so I decided, that's not for me. So with that, my dad again convinced me, why don't you become a nurse? And I was like, do men become nurses? Is that something that happens to, like, I always thought of nurses as a woman's role. And he said, no, I think there's a couple guys in the class, you should check it out. And from that, the rest is history. 20 years ago, I've been a nurse. And so he motivated me and just showed me, like, you can be whatever you want to be and do what you want to in life. So it was a big change. My dad also had that unique ability to instill in us just motivation to be anything we wanted to be. And if I look back, I see much of him in me and my brother. He and Mom both had wonderful, and they were both wonderful and ever present in our lives. They gave us the best childhood, full of memories. Let's not forget that Dad also had a really funny side as well too, that rarely came out. It was hard to bring him through. There's a picture that's on the slide that goes through, and one time we had some extra props that Mom had, and there were wigs and clothes and funny things. And Mom's like, let's just put this on, and then we can call Nick and Averill and Peter and just give them a surprise call through Skype. And so we did all that, and it was, next thing you know, their faces, like Nick's face, and Averill was like, who is this? I'm like, why are you calling me? And we're like, no, it's us, and we were just being funny, but my dad there's a picture of him, he looks like he's a French man, and he has a mustache he painted on, and had hair coming out of his shirt, and he had a wig, and he put one wig on top and another wig here. And I was like, wow, Dad has this really funny side that you just rarely ever see, and so it was a very warming thing to see. Let's see, there was also another moment being funny like that too, is once we moved to Mississippi, Dad would at times pretend he was the farmer because, he had a tractor, and he's like, well, we have all this land and we have to do these things. And I'd catch him riding by with some hay in his mouth and a hat on, and just like, wow. And his shirt would say gone fishing or something. I was like, he really got into this role. So he was always a man of few words, but he chose them well. Whether he was a salesman selling the next newest medical device or closing a real estate transaction, my dad just knew how to, work the room and finesse the situation. He always knew that he wanted to form an authentic relationship that was beautiful with people. He was honest and truthful. He has the gift of serving. That was something that I saw later in life. I was like, well, this is his gift. He can serve in the church, and he just went above and beyond just to do things for the church and to help. And it was just fascinating to watch. This truly meant a lot, and he truly cared about each one of the people that he worked with. And Dad was always continually learning more about Jesus and his journey in life. And it seemed to be towards the end, maybe in the last 10 years or so, that you had small groups, and he decided to pursue that. He always felt like there's something I got to find out, or something I have to learn, and I think he did learn. I think he found out his answers. Dad was always there for us. He was compassionate, a man of integrity, and I just kept saying that like when I was there with him, that wow, like he's such a good man. I mean, everything was just amazing. He was so genuine, and he made an impression on a lot of people that he met. His wisdom always continued to guide me and all of us here, I believe. While we mourn the loss of Richard Dirga, let's also celebrate his life as well too. It's a time of happiness as well. Always remember the laughter, the love, the countless times we shared. Sorry. His spirit lives on in each of us, in our memories, and the ways that he shaped our lives. Dad was always a fighter. He just always seemed to be hanging in there till the end. He always greeted us with a smile. He never said he complained about anything, that he was in pain. He just, just kind of carried on with everything. In the last couple of days, his life was really hard. I spent 7 days with him day and night, and with Nick as well. And it was just incredible to see how he hung on. I mean, like I said, he would have lived to be 100. I think he didn't have the cancer. His heart, his lungs would keep beating. And everything I've learned in the 20 years of nursing wouldn't make sense. You're just like, it's not possible to be able to do that. And he sustained himself for that so long. And then eventually when we all had our backs away, just for a minute or two, my wife had noticed, because we had a camera to watch on him as well too, and she said, I don't think he's breathing, and I said, really? And we went back in there, and he was just still and completely calm, and I was like, wow, this is great, this is so peaceful, like, he's finally went, and I know he's just happy, Let us hold on to these promises from God. He will wipe every tear away from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the older things have passed away. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So let us fix our eyes on what is not seen, but what is unseen, since what is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do something a little bit different. By the way, I'm Howard Levine. I've been a longtime friend. Kids grew up together. Then Peggy were very close. Chick and I were very, very close. So, what I'm going to ask you is to please, if you can't see the picture of Dick, if you could please take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes and imagine Dick. And I have a few words to say about Dick as you do that. So please, take a deep breath. Richard Dirga. Honest, loyal, generous, adventurous, great integrity, courageous, accountable, a seeker. Dick Dirga. A listener, empathetic, disciplined, creative, confident, compassionate, chin dimple, Take a deep breath. Dick Dirga, resilient, patient, embraced love. Family, optimistic, enthusiastic, conscientious, flexible, resourceful, consistent. Dick Dirga. Forgiving, kind, curious, humorous, open-minded, father, husband. Dick Dirga. Humble, respectful, dedicated, quiet, soft, firm, strength, present. Dick Dirga. Great hair. Genuine. Full of gratitude. Dick Dirga. Friend. Love. Thank you. Shalom.
Thank you so much, Howard and Janet, for standing up and speaking. I'm actually going to change things up a little bit because you've all been talking for a while, and these seats are hard, and some of us are old. But what I would like to do is just let everybody have a chance to mingle and talk about Dad a little bit. I think if you have anything you want to tell us about Dad, Chaz and I are here, but we don't want everybody to be chained to your seats, and we've been here for about an hour, so we want to just have a chance to mingle, talk about Dad, say hi to Mom, say hi to us, and friends you maybe haven't seen in a long time, you know? And remember Dad as the amazing person he was. This is not a sad day. It's a good day. There's so many people here, you know? You don't know how many people are going to show up. It's not like a wedding where you send invitations out and you think, well, if there's 9 people here, I'm going to feel a little foolish. We kept getting chairs out, so that's great. And we've got a little brochure flyer about Dad's life that I put together with some of the amazing tributes from family and friends just all over the world that I thought were worth including. So please grab one of those if you like. There's a memory book there. Please feel free to write anything you remember about Dad, want us to know. We would love to read them later and enjoy the memories with him. We've got a lovely slideshow going in there that some of you have seen already. That all 83 years of Dad's life are on there, from embarrassing baby photos to photos of him with his latest grandchild, who was born just 3 months before he died. And just thank you all so much for coming. But we'll have some food here in a few moments that'll be ready for everybody to enjoy. Some drinks, and just thank you. Dad thanks you wherever he is.
Lift your foot. Pat. 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 Everybody go ahead. Hi, Diane.